Today we will be learning about Stripe's webhook so you can create powerful functions when a certain event is triggered through Stripe. So what we're going to be using is Next.js 14 as the framework. We're going to be using TypeScript as the coding language. We're also going to be using Stripe APIs, and we're going to have access to the Stripe dashboard, so stripe.com. There is a few prerequisites before starting that you should know. Is you should have a basic understanding of JavaScript or TypeScript, and you should also have a Stripe account. So that means you need to go over to stripe.com if you don't have an account and go create one, because we are going to need access to the dashboard. And before we get started, if you can hit that like button so this gets pushed up in the YouTube algorithm so more people like you can see, and also subscribe for more content just like this. So let's get ready and let's get coding. Okay, so what are webhooks and what are they with Stripe? So Stripe webhooks allow you to pretty much trigger events that Stripe has in real time. And when this happens, it will fire off a function that you can define and create its own logic for. So a really good use case is when somebody purchases your product or monthly recurring subscription, and you want to send them an email thanking them for their purchase and just confirming that they received their product or something along the lines of that. This is where the Stripe webhook will come into play. And as you can see here, I'm on their API docs. And what it says is it listens to events in your Stripe account on your webhook endpoint so your integration can automatically trigger reactions. So you could go through all of these docs and it will definitely help you understand what Stripe webhooks are. But like I said, they just trigger events through Stripe, and we get to choose which events we want to listen to. And you have to do that through the Stripe dashboard, which I will show you later. But that is in a nutshell what Stripe webhooks are, and just webhooks are in general. They just listen to real-time data trigger events. Now jumping over to the actual code, the first thing you want to do is you want to install the Stripe package. I'm using npm, so I'm going to say npm I Stripe, and you just install Stripe into your package JSON, and you are ready to go. And then after you have that package, you want to actually initialize Stripe. So I like to initialize Stripe in my lib folder. And inside my lib folder, I have a stripe.ts file. And this is how you initialize Stripe here, so you can use it anywhere in your application. All you have to do is import Stripe from Stripe. You're going to create a function and export it as a named component or default, doesn't matter. And what we're going to do here is we are using the Stripe method, like this function they give us. And what we're passing into it is the Stripe secret key, which I will show you where you're going to get your Stripe secret key in just a second. But I am storing mine in an env file under the variable Stripe _secret _key. For this specific project, I'm using API version 2022.11.15. But if you're watching this video, use the latest version of Stripe's API version, which is 2023.10.16. And I am using TypeScript, so I put true. So we have that, and that is exporting, and now we could use it anywhere in our application as long as we import it. So that is us initializing Stripe. And the next thing you want to do after that is inside of the app folder, inside of your API folder, you want to create a folder called Webhook, and then a route.ts file in it. And this is where we are going to be able to define our webhook and be able to pretty much capture the real-time events and define the functions that we want to fire off when those events are triggered. So to get your Stripe webhook secret or any of your API keys, you're going to be on a dashboard page like this if you have an account, which you should by now. And you're going to see at the top right that it says test mode and developers. So first off, just go into test mode because we're just testing our application right now, and then click developers, which is us. And as you can see, we have a few tabs. We have API keys, webhooks, events, logs, apps. We want to click API keys, and you're going to be on a screen like this, and you're going to see secret key. You want to reveal your test key and then copy and paste it. And then I think if you haven't created your secret key, it'll just say create secret key or something along the lines of that. Just get your secret key, copy it, paste it in your env file, and store it in a variable like I did, which was Stripe _webhook, Stripe _secret _key. So that is how you get your Stripe secret key. Now it's time to actually start coding inside of your Stripe webhook API route. So the very first thing is we need to import a few things at the top. We're going to import capital S Stripe from Stripe, and this is going to allow us to use types because we're using TypeScript from Stripe. So they give us types from Stripe. Another thing is we're going to import the Stripe from the lib folder that we created. We're also going to import headers, and this is coming from Next.js. So Next/headers, just like that. And we're also going to import Next response, and this is coming from Next/server. So those are going to be our 4 imports that we are going to use for our Stripe API webhook. Next is the webhook is going to be a post request. So what we're going to do is we're going to do export async function post, and what this is going to take in is a request from Stripe, and it's going to be type request, and let's open up a code block just like that. Okay, so the very first thing we want to do is we want to get the payload that is coming from Stripe, which is going to pretty much be all the information on the events that we are listening for. So we're going to say const body equals await request dot text, like that, instead of dot JSON, because we don't want it in JSON format, we want it in string format. So we have to make it a request dot text, just like that. Next thing we want to do is we need to get the Stripe header from Stripe, the Stripe signature header to be exact. So we're going to say const signature equals, it is going to be in a little different of a format because we're using Next.js. It's going to be headers dot get, and what we're getting, the name of the header that Stripe is sending over is the Stripe signature, like that, and we're going to say as a string. So what this essentially does, it pretty much makes sure that it verifies that Stripe is the one actually sending the request to us, and it's not like a virus or somebody trying to hack into your system. So Stripe is going to make sure they send a signature, and then you're going to run a function that is going to verify that the signature matches up with Stripe itself. So that is what the signature is. Next thing we want to do is we want to initialize a variable called event, and this is going to have a type from Stripe called stripe.event, like that. And after that, we need to run a try catch block. So we're going to have a try catch block, and inside of the try, we're going to have event equals, and it'll be a stripe.webhooks.construct event. And this is going to take in the body, the signature. So these are the 2 variables we create at the top. And then it's also going to take in the Stripe Webhook secret. And then we're just going to put exclamation mark to make sure that's always there. So I store my Stripe Webhook secret inside of my env file. And I'm going to show you guys where you could get your webhook secret as well. So we're going to go back to our dashboard. And I'm on the dashboard page. We're going to click test mode because we're testing it out. Click developers. And then what we're going to do here is we're going to click webhooks. And then we're going to add a local listener. So there's 2 places you get the webhook secret from. If you see here at the right, we have an endpoint, and here is your endpoint secret right here. It always starts with a WHSEC, and you copy this whole value and then paste it in your env file, and just make sure your env variable matches up with your variable that you are defining inside of your webhook. So that is where you're going to get your webhook secret. Let's go back to the code, and that is all that is left in the try block. Let's go to the catch, and let's just return a new next response. And what we can return is invalid signature, which is what it is usually most of the time. Your signature is invalid because you're not requesting it in and parsing it right. And we're going to give it a status of 400. So we have that try catch there. And let's define one more variable called session. And this is going to equal the event.data.object. And the type is going to be as a stripe.checkout.session. Okay, so let's next turn on our local listener through Stripe's dashboard. So to do that, we're going back to Stripe's dashboard, and we are going to follow these 3 steps. And to get to this page again, you go from your dashboard to test mode and then to developers. You'll be on a page like this. Go to Webhooks, click add local listener, and then for step 1, we are going to download the CLI. So the first step is you need to install the Stripe CLI. I'm using Windows, so I'm going to click Windows, and we are going to download the latest Windows zip file from GitHub. So I'm going to open this in a new tab. Download the latest version, which is at the bottom where it says Windows. Click it. It downloads to my computer. Next, we're going to have to unzip the file, right? So we're going to extract all. So our file is unzipped now, and now we need to open it with the command line. So I'm going to run cmd.exe, and it is going to open up my command line with the Stripe that I just installed onto my computer. Okay, so let's go back to the steps, and we have to log into the CLI now. So we could copy Stripe login right here and paste it in there and press enter. And what it's going to do is it's going to give you a pairing code. It's random. It's always random. So don't worry about it. Mine's Relief, Swift, Unity, Trump. And after you do that, you're going to open this link. And you're just going to make sure that it's the same code. And you're just going to click allow access to make sure you allow access to Stripe to start listening on your local computer. Okay, so we could close this tab, and we could close the GitHub tab. Okay, so after that, we go to over here, and for step 1, where we download the CLI, it's going to say completed, right? Because now we're logged in, and it's almost ready. Now we need to forward the events to the webhook. Okay, so we're going to copy this, and we're going to paste this, but we're not going to press enter because ours is going to be localhost 3000/API/webhook. And obviously do whatever path that you're doing. If you're following along with me, this is our path. So we're going to click enter, and it's going to start listening to events on that specific path. And when you do that, it's going to say step 2 is completed. And then step 3 is just going to be triggering an event. So if you don't have an application and you just want to test out trigger events to make sure it's working, you could click this down arrow, click what event you want to trigger, and then copy this and paste it in this CLI again. And you should be able to see it in your logs on Stripe. But we're going to do that all through the application that I have for this example video, because I do have a Stripe checkout set up and ready to go, which I'm going to show you that code right now. So we're going to open up our code, right? And like I said, I have a checkout from Stripe. It's a pre-built Stripe checkout page. And if you want, you can pause the video and see the actual code. But here is the code. I have it inside of a GET request API inside of a Stripe folder, route.ts file. And what we're doing is I'm just setting a variable called Stripe session, and we are calling stripe.checkout.session.create. And we're just passing all of the parameters and options that you can to this specific function right here that Stripe allows us to do, which, like I said, this creates a new checkout session with a pre-built page. So if you want, I'd recommend looking at the docs to see all the options. But the one I want to talk about, which is very important when it comes to the webhook, is this metadata object here. This is optional, but I feel like it is very important if you're using Stripe webhooks. And the reason being is because when you do a Stripe webhook, for example, when somebody completes a checkout session, there's a few use cases, and one will be to send an email to that customer, thanking them for the purchase or whatever the case may be. And the other thing is to update your database. So you probably want to update your database with a specific data point. And for me to query or mutate any data in my database, I need the ID associated with the user. And for me, that's stored in the session.id, which I am getting from my front end. So I want to pass the metadata of user ID equaling to the session ID. And the metadata, all it is a key value pair that you can attach to an object. And you're going to be able to access this metadata inside of your Stripe webhooks. And I'll show you exactly what I mean by that. But make sure when you do a checkout session, add the metadata object and pass anything you want that you think you need from the metadata into it so you can actually access it on your webhook. Okay, so that is that right there. And let's go back to our webhook. And what I want to do is now kind of complete it, and then we're just going to test it out with a few consoles. So the next step is we're going to say if event.type equals checkout.session.completed. Then we are going to run this code block, and we could say console.log payment was successful. I don't think we have the session ID, so I'm just going to remove that for now. Payment was successful for user. Okay. And the other thing I want to add to this code right underneath this is I want to get the subscription. So I'm going to show you exactly how to get the subscription. And that is, for me, valuable because what I'm doing is I have a subscription-based model. If you have a one-time payment model, there's no point of doing the subscription variable. So don't even worry about this step, but you can still follow along to learn. So we're going to do await stripe dot subscriptions dot retrieve, and what we're going to retrieve is the session dot subscription, and that's going to be as a string. And then we could console log the subscription, like that, and this is going to be subscription. And I also want to console log the session right here, just so we can see what's inside the session. And then we can also console log the event. I just want to show you what's inside of everything so you guys know exactly what's going on. And the other thing you guys are probably wondering about, where I kind of skimmed over real quick, was how did I get this event type of checkout.session.completed? Well, if you go to Google and you type Stripe Webhook events like this, you could look at all the type of events that you can actually listen for in Stripe. Okay, so you could look through all of these are all events, and I'm going to go where we were. So the event we're using is the checkout.session.completed, and this occurs when a checkout session has been successfully completed. This is a very, very common event that a lot of people check for when running the Stripe webhook. But like I said, you can go through all of these events and see which ones you want to use and which ones you want to listen for. So that's how I got this value here. And let's just do a return real quick, like return new next response. We could just say okay with a status of 200. Okay, so now we should be able to test out our webhook to see if it's working or not. And like I said, when you're testing your webhook, make sure your local listener is actually listening. Okay, so mine is ready and it's listening for events. So as you can see, listening for events. And you do not have to do step 3. Step 3 is just manually triggering an event through the CLI. But we are just going to trigger the event through my Stripe checkout, which I just went over that whole file, and that's how we're going to trigger it. So what we're going to do is I'm going to open up the terminal, run the development server. It'll open up localhost 3000, and we are going to try to check out. So I got to sign in first on my application that I've created here. Okay, so now I'm signed in, and I'm just going to click upgrade and then upgrade again. This is where my Stripe checkout is. And this is going to open up a test mode pre-built checkout page. You could use a card 424242. That's for test mode purposes only. And then any date you want here, any zip code, uncheck this. And then when I click subscribe, the checkout.session.completed event is going to fire. And since I have the webhook listening, it is going to receive that and then call that code block. And it should console log the subscription, the session, the event, and we should be able to see it in the terminal. And then we can also check the Stripe logs inside the webhook to see if it actually ran off. So I'm going to have this, I'm going to open this up after I click it, and you'll be able to see that we get 200 requests if it's successful. Okay, so we have our Stripe CLI listening, and as you can see, we're getting a bunch of 200 requests, and it is telling you which events it's firing for. So it's firing for the checkout session completed, invoice payment succeeded, invoice paid, invoice updated, invoice finalized. I mean, you could just read through all this, and this is the CLI telling you that there are 200 requests at the post request at the specific route right here, localhost 3000 /API/webhook. Okay. And now we could go to our code. Actually, before we go to the code, let me go over here, and then you could go click logs, and you should be able to see the logs of what just happened. So you can see we got 200 requests and all of the event logs that are logged in here as well. So you could check the logs if you want, or if you console log it, you should be able to see all of the data. So I'm going to open this up. And what I'm going to do is, I know we console logged a few things. So let me scroll up, and I can show you exactly where everything is inside of everything. So you can see we got payment was successful for user, right? Where did we console that? Payment was successful for user. So that means that the checkout.session.complete event type fired, and it console logged that. And then we also console log the event. So you can see right here, we console log the event. It has an ID, an object, API version created at, and then it has data. So event.data.object. So if you look down here, the session equals the event.data.object, correct? And then we also console log the session. So technically the session should be all of this, right? All of this down here. So now if we go to the session, you can see it is the same thing as this here. So this is just giving you information on pretty much the product that they checked out. And then we also console log the subscription. And the subscription is pretty much an object that is only called if the mode is on subscription. So if you're not offering subscription, you're not going to be able to console log the subscription because it's not going to show you anything. So there's that, and it's showing you the plan that they use, the ID of the price, if it's true. I mean, there's so many things you could see in here. So it is very useful to console log everything so you can see exactly what you need to extract in order to use the webhooks to your advantage. What I want to do is I just want to paste. Let me remove all these consoles real quick. And then I just want to paste a code, and then you guys could pause the screen and copy it so you could use it potentially for your application. So what I want to do is, actually, I want to go back to the console real quick and show you something important for the metadata. So the metadata is going to be inside the session, correct? So let's go to the session real quick. So we log the session. Okay, and now we're looking for the metadata. And the metadata is an empty object. So that means we didn't pass anything back, which is kind of weird. Maybe it's because it didn't console log the session. But if you pass stuff back in through metadata, you should have something inside of your metadata, not an empty object. So make sure you're actually passing in data into your metadata so you can receive it inside the session.metadata. And what you can do here is, after you get the ID, you can actually run pretty much queries or mutations to your database and update your user or send an email. So that is how you use the Stripe webhook for your local host, or on your local computer. And it is that simple, that easy. Everything will be timestamped. So if you need to go back, something's confusing, you could definitely look at that. But I'll also upload the GitHub for this code as well. And now I want to show you guys the production side of it. So if we go back to the Stripe dashboard, we actually have to click this off, right? And what we can do here is we could click API keys. So first thing is you're going to switch your API key. Okay. So you're going to click API keys, and then you're going to switch the API key from your lib folder. So this folder, that Initialize Stripe, and you stored it in your Stripe _secret_ key. So make sure you switch that key to your production and not your test mode when you actually want to launch your application. Next thing you want to do is you want to go to your webhooks, right? And your webhooks, you're going to add a not local listener, my fault guys. You're going to add an endpoint. So you're just going to add an endpoint, and you're going to do like HTTPS, and then whatever your endpoint is, like if it's chatty.com/API/webhook. So whatever your production URL is, just add the /API/webhook, add the endpoint. The description is optional. And then also too, you must select the events you want to listen for. This is super, super important. So if you don't select the events that you want to listen for, it's not going to listen for those events. And if you're trying to call a function on a certain event that you're not listening for, that function is never going to fire. And then make sure you're obviously on the right version as well. But you need to select the events. So if you want to select, for example, the checkout, I click it, and then we could do checkout session.completed, right? And then click add events. And then it pops up here, and then you're just going to click add endpoint. And obviously the webhook URL cannot be empty, but you get the point. That's how you do it inside of production. And then also too, make sure you update your webhook API key as well. So you're gonna have to update it from that local one to your production one as well. But other than that, that is pretty much everything you need to know about webhooks and how you should operate with them. And you can test webhooks in production as well if need be, which I can show you that as well. So if we go over to another business profile of mine and we click on customers, right? You can actually click on a customer. So this is my email. And what you can do here is trial ends May 13th. You can click their thing and you could click actions, and then you can actually pretty much update the subscription based on whatever event you want to listen for. So for example, sometimes there's an event where the free trial ends and 3 days before you want to send them an email. You could update the subscription and do it based on that event, so the event would actually fire. So there is a lot of flexibility with Stripe. There is a learning curve, but hopefully this video has helped you guys navigate through the Stripe webhook. And if you guys do have any questions about this, please leave them in the comments, or you guys could join my Discord room. We have about 350 people in there that are always answering questions with each other, and you guys could always ask me questions there as well. But other than that, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, hit that like button and also subscribe for more content just like this.